Pumpkin spice. It appears every August, just before the leaves fall, before the weather turns cold, before autumn has even begun meteorologically. And somehow, you still want it. That craving you feel, that specific, almost nostalgic pull toward a warm drink in a paper cup, is not a seasonal instinct. It is not your body responding to the changing of the seasons. It is a corporate signal so deeply embedded into your behavioral calendar that it now feels biological. You think it's a need. Pumpkin spice is not a flavor. It is a psychological trigger. And that trigger, deliberately, systematically, with significant financial investment, was designed by a coffee company in the fall of 2003 to solve a very specific business problem. Here is what they never put on the cup. The Pumpkin Spice Latte does not contain pumpkin. The original formula had no pumpkin. For over a decade after its launch, there was not a trace of real pumpkin in the most popular seasonal beverage in American coffee history. The pumpkin was always a prop. The spice was always the product. And the season, autumn, with all of its emotional weight, was always the marketing strategy. This is not a coffee story. This is the story of how a single company manufactured a sensory identity for an entire season of the year, embedded it into American consumer culture in less than 5 years, and created a flavor category worth over $600 million annually, out of a spice blend that has existed for centuries and a fruit that made up not even 1% of the drink. Starbucks is a dominant force in American coffee culture, but it has a structural business problem that no level of market dominance can solve on its own. Coffee consumption is relatively flat throughout the year. People drink coffee every day, but they do not dramatically increase their spending in any particular season. There are no natural peaks, no organic surges, no annual occasions that drive premium coffee purchases the way holidays drive retail. Starbucks had already demonstrated with the peppermint mocha and the eggnog latte that holiday flavors could generate meaningful seasonal revenue spikes. Winter was solved, but the period between summer and winter, September through November, was stagnant. Traffic was declining. Average ticket size was dropping. Customers had no reason to upgrade their orders. The brief given to Starbucks product developer Peter Jukes was clear. Design a beverage that turns autumn into a purchase occasion. Not just a seasonal product. A purchase occasion. A reason for people to come in specifically because of the time of year. The way people buy candy corn not because they particularly love it, but because it's October. The target emotion was nostalgia. Specifically, the nostalgia associated with Thanksgiving preparation, pumpkin pie coming out of the oven, warm spices, family gatherings, the comfort of a house that smells like cinnamon and clove on a cold afternoon. They weren't selling coffee. They were selling a memory that hadn't happened yet. The spice blend known as pumpkin spice is not a new invention. It is a standardized culinary mixture with a history stretching back centuries. Its core components, cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, clove, and allspice, are derived from the bark, seeds, or dried flower buds of plants native to South and Southeast Asia. They reached Europe through the spice trade routes that defined the 15th and 16th centuries. By the 19th century, American cookbooks were already combining these spices in fixed ratios for use in autumn desserts, particularly pumpkin pie. The reason it is called pumpkin spice is not because it contains pumpkin, but because it was historically used to flavor pumpkin pie. The name refers to the application, not the ingredient. The spice company McCormick had been selling a pre-mixed pumpkin pie spice blend in American grocery stores since 1934. For nearly 70 years, this blend remained just a baking ingredient. Something sitting in the back of the cabinet. Something used twice a year, if you were the kind of person who baked pies from scratch. What Starbucks did was not discover a new flavor, but extract this spice blend from its baking context, place it into a sweet, milk-based espresso drink, and attach it to an emotion. The original Pumpkin Spice Latte formula consisted of espresso, steamed milk, a proprietary syrup containing cinnamon, clove, and nutmeg, and a topping of whipped cream dusted with pumpkin pie spice. The syrup was developed in Starbucks product labs in Seattle over several months through iterative consumer taste testing. The pumpkin flavor in the drink came entirely from the spice combination. There was no pumpkin puree, no pumpkin extract. The spices alone, particularly the warm sweetness of cinnamon and the slightly bitter earthiness of nutmeg, trigger olfactory associations with pumpkin that the brain interprets as the presence of the fruit itself. Starbucks wasn't lying about pumpkin. They were leveraging neuroscience. The Pumpkin Spice Latte launched in fall 2003, in approximately 100 stores. As a test, Consumer response was immediate and far beyond projections. The drink sold out within weeks. Customer demand at non-participating stores became so intense that Starbucks accelerated a national rollout the following year. By 2004, the Pumpkin Spice Latte was available across all Starbucks stores in the United States. By 2006, it had become the best-selling seasonal beverage in the company's history. But what made it not just commercially successful, but culturally transformative, was this. Starbucks made a deliberate decision not to sell the drink year-round. They constrained supply seasonally, releasing it in late August or early September and pulling it before winter beverages took over. Artificial scarcity applied to a flavor. The withdrawal of the product was the strategy itself. When something disappears, its return becomes an event. When that return happens every year, it becomes a ritual. When enough people participate, it becomes culture. Within 3 years of its national launch, the media began covering the return of the Pumpkin Spice Latte as a news event. Not a press release, actual news. Journalists wrote about it. Blogs counted down to its release. Social media, even in its early stages, generated organic conversation that Starbucks neither paid for nor could have directly manufactured. A cultural calendar marker had been created. The return of the PSL signaled the beginning of autumn. Not the other way around. The Pumpkin Spice Latte didn't just sell coffee. It created a flavor category. Before 2003, pumpkin spice was used almost exclusively in baking. McCormick Spice Blend and a few candles. Within 5 years, manufacturers across every category began producing pumpkin spice products. This was not a coincidence. Sales data showed that pumpkin spice drove premium pricing, high sales velocity, and purchasing behavior that was otherwise difficult to trigger seasonally. Pumpkin spice coffee creamer, yogurt, breakfast cereal, protein bars, dog treats, cream cheese, Oreos. By 2015, this category exceeded $500 million annually in the United States. By 2023, it had surpassed $600 million. Every dollar of that market traces back to a single product development brief in 2003. The companies entering this space were not responding to pre-existing demand. They were following a behavioral signal that Starbucks had installed in consumers, the Pavlovian association between pumpkin spice and the emotional rewards of autumn. Starbucks had effectively licensed autumn to the food industry. Without a contract. Without royalties. Through pure cultural influence. In 2014, food blogger Vonnie Harry, known as Food Babe, analyzed the ingredient list and noticed something. There was no real pumpkin. This went viral. Starbucks had to respond. Because the issue wasn't technical accuracy, it was perceived authenticity. In 2015, the formula was changed to include real pumpkin puree. Chemically, this meant very little. Pumpkin contributes almost nothing to the flavor profile. Its mild, starchy taste is completely overshadowed by the spice and sugar. The consumer experience barely changed. What changed was not the flavor, but the label. And the label changed how consumers perceive the product. Because authenticity is not sensory, it is cognitive. Today's PSL contains real pumpkin, but it is not the source of its taste. Starbucks added pumpkin not for flavor, but for trust. Why does pumpkin spice function so powerfully as a cultural trigger? 3 mechanisms operate simultaneously. First, olfactory memory. Cinnamon and nutmeg activate the limbic system, directly tied to emotion. Smell bypasses conscious filtering. This combination activates childhood memories. Second, scarcity psychology. Seasonal limitation triggers loss aversion. The product disappears, then returns, and that return feels like a reward. Third, social identity signaling. The PSL became a symbol of participating in autumn. It is shared, displayed, turned into identity. Starbucks did not invent these mechanisms, but they combined all of them into a single product. Autumn is real. The desire for warmth as the air cools is real. The comfort of familiar smells is real. Starbucks did not invent those things, but they created a purchasable product that represents all of those emotions. And they marketed it so effectively that the feeling and the product have become inseparable. Now the process runs in reverse. Autumn does not trigger the craving for pumpkin spice. Seeing pumpkin spice triggers the feeling of autumn. A company's product has become the primary sensory marker of a season. That is a level of brand penetration with no parallel in food history. When you smell cinnamon and nutmeg at the end of August and feel something shift inside you, that feeling is real. Its source was designed in a product lab in Seattle in 2003. Don't forget to write in the comments what we should cover next. Thanks for watching.